Hey folks, Professor Finn here, and today we're going to be looking at Chapter 5 in Ralph Klicker's Funeral Service Psychology and Counseling book. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about normal grief reactions. So first up, as in other chapters, let's get some definitions out of the way. First up is feelings, reactions of the body to an event often experienced emotionally as a sudden, violent, and upsetting disturbance. Emotions, we've seen this definition before. Feelings such as happiness, anger, and grief caused by brain patterns and bodily changes. We have guilt, blame directed at oneself, maybe based on real or unreal conditions. And anxiety, a state of tension typically characterized by rapid heartbeat and shortness of breath. An emotion characterized by a vague fear or premonition that something undesirable is going to happen. Now, anyone working close with the bereaved needs to be familiar with normal responses that they may encounter. We're going to learn this here in mortuary school, and then you're just going to see this in application through the entirety of your career. Uneducated persons may interpret normal grief reactions as something extraordinary, and that is the way a lot of lay people approach this. This has to be unreal. These feelings aren't normal. For grief, they're actually fairly vanilla. And that's just the truth of the matter. So shock, disbelief, denial usually occurs with sudden deaths, but may also come as a result of long-time illness. So most commonly, we have shock, disbelief, and denial because something happens very rapidly. That being said, it is not outside the realm of possibility that even with an impending death that you're shocked that it happens. And this is true because what we see is as a person gets closer to that point of death, there are some wonderful videos on YouTube from hospice nurses that talk about the death and dying process. And they'll say right before death, usually this appeared with a rally really strong. And then the person dies shortly thereafter, and hospice nurses know that, hey, when you see that, that's usually a pretty good indicator that something's going to happen relatively quick. And if a family doesn't know that or doesn't comprehend that, then they may be absolutely shocked that that person pass away. And this disbelief is happening because it's a defense mechanism to allow the person time to adjust to the situation. This is usually a short-term emotional response. You have sadness. Can be felt for the deceased for suffering during life or because not being able to experience life any longer. Sadness can be felt for the individual and for the individual's own loss. Loneliness can be felt even if the mourner has many friends and is socially active. Guilt may be real or perceived. This is often exaggerated because death does not allow the person to resolve the issue that caused the guilt with the deceased to begin with. We have anger, directed at the deceased for dying or at God for not preventing the death or at self or at other people. So you can be angry at literally everyone and everything. You could be angry just at yourself. You could be angry at the world. This is a very complicated emotion. Anxiety can range from mild insecurity to intense panic. The fear of one's own death or fear of how life will be without the deceased may cause anxiety. And now we have crying. The physical or emotional response either has therapeutic value. This is why we should encourage people to cry. This helps get it out of their system quite literally. Crying diminishes the negative effects of pent-up emotions and relieves stress. You have to have that good cry. And a lot of people might say that, hey, I had a good cry and I felt better. There's a reason for that. There are 3 types of tears. Now, this is something that is not in this textbook. This comes from an alternate source, and it's necessary to understand that this is an important piece of information in your funeral service education. So reflex tears are what allows your eyes to clear out particles. So this is just standard tears that you're having a physiological reaction, your eyes are trying to clear out. 98% water. Continuous tears, which are continuously made to keep your eyes lubricated. So this is a physiological tear that is natural for your eyes to stay hydrated. And these contain lysosome that prevents infections. Now, if you have already listened to the chemistry or the embalming lectures, you'll know that lysosome is an enzyme that breaks things down. Well, if it contains an enzyme that breaks things down, this is what's killing the stuff that's on the surface of your eye. And finally, emotional tears. Dr. William Frey discovered that emotional tears contain hormones and toxins that accumulate during times of stress and stimulate the productions of endorphins. Humans are the only creatures who are known to shed emotional tears. Quite literally, when you are shedding emotional tears, you are getting it out of your system, is the moral of the story. Another emotional response is a preoccupation with thoughts of the deceased. This can cause absent-mindedness or inability to concentrate, maybe past thoughts or current future fantasies with the deceased. Dreams and nightmares can be very distressful, can increase feelings of guilt, fear, and anxiety. Pleasant dreams may give the person reassurance and calm. Confusing awake events, usually considered to be paranormal or spiritual, but have firm foundation in reality and psychology. This includes seeing, hearing the deceased, or feeling as though the deceased is present or directing events. That is a really spooky one. I have had something like that, and you are convinced that person is there. That was actually pretty shocking. You have spiritual responses. Well, you can go both ways. It can strengthen a person's spiritual belief, or it can weaken a person's spiritual belief when a person dies. This is a normal grief reaction, and causing questions as to the meaning of life and death, beliefs and values. You have cognitive responses. The preoccupation with death is the most common. You start really thinking about mortality. And because your mind is working on that, it's not working on other things. So then you have an inability to concentrate and you have disorganized thoughts. Now, this also can occur on a subliminal stage. So you may have someone who is sitting there losing their mind because they're an accountant or they work in a very intellectual capacity, and they're not functioning the way they normally are, and they don't understand why. And it's because deep down inside, their body is taking some of that energy of the mental engine and putting it into this, even though they don't realize it. The sense of presence, seeing, hearing loved ones, suicidal thoughts, inability to remember, easily distracted. Again, when you will go through a death event, your mind is thinking about other things, and your mind tends to wander. Some of the statements you could hear with these cognitive responses: I wish I could have. I wish it could have been me. It seems like a bad dream. Why? I think I'm going crazy. If only. It is one of those things that indicates that the person is thinking about this and they're trying to process. We have behavioral responses, doing or saying things contrary to beliefs or accustomed behavior, staying inside all the time or needing to stay away from home, frequent visits to the gravesite, church, or places associated with the deceased, a loss of interest in social activities in the world in general. Some of you may be going, well, wait a second, this sounds like a laundry list of depression. Very, very similar. Sleep disturbances, increase in chemical use, which is drugs, alcohols, illicit substances. Frequent crying or angry outbursts. You have physical responses to grief: sighing, headache, startle responses, crying, clearly crying. Menstrual difficulties, dizziness, fatigue, trembling. Remember, Lindemann said there are physical attachments to these symptoms that are happening, that it's not just in your head. What happens in your head actually affects what your body is doing. Muscular tension, insomnia, emptiness in gut, appetite loss, stomach problems, something stuck in throat, lowered immunity to illness, sexual desire changes, shortness of breath, increased or decreased activity. You have mental responses, negative thoughts, confusion, difficulty concentrating, lower productivity, sleeplessness, forgetting details, mind going blank. There's a lot of things that people think are exceptional when you're going through a death event. And quite literally, the list of them that you've seen today is, this is just normal for most people. These are things you're going to see in the industry all the time. And people don't realize that, no, even though you're having these really bad thoughts, hey, this is part of what we do. This is part of your natural grieving reaction. So don't feel that you're really, really broken here. This is what your body quite literally does when it goes through a grief event. As always, folks, we will see you next video.